Welcome to another lesson about vocabulary. So this is with the TV show Sherlock, an American, it's called Elementary, but it's about Sherlock. It's an American version of Sherlock Holmes, but the main character is still from England and speaks with a British accent, but Watson speaks with an American accent. So it's very good for vocabulary. Please go to the link, if I remember to put it up here, to my website, where you'll find loads of information about every single episode, lots of vocab, lots of exercises and quizzes. So, firstly, crime and law vocabulary. It mentions abusers. You could be a drug abuser, or you could be, several other types of abusers are out there, but the common thread is that abuse is some kind of it could be drug abuse, it could be alcohol abuse, but it could also be something terrible like child abuse or something like that. So this word is used in a number of different ways related to crime. It also talks about abduction in this episode, which is another word for kidnapping. However, kidnapping always sounds to me like it involves a ransom demand. There's money always as the motivation for kidnapping. But abduction may not be like that. Perhaps there's some kind of argument about who has the right to look after the child, and maybe even one of the parents abducts their own child. If they've split up, if they've separated for some kind of reason, then perhaps you do hear stories about child abduction like that. So it's not necessarily kidnapping, although it is a form of taking someone away from the place where they were living before. Immunity from prosecution. In this episode, in episode number 3, Adam is offered immunity from prosecution in exchange for information. So this means immunity from being taken to court and charged for certain crimes. So if you are offered immunity from prosecution, it's obviously a good thing for you because you're not going to be charged with those crimes. So Adam, because he was a child at the time, he was offered immunity from prosecution for any crimes that he was involved in when he was a child, as long as he gave them information about his abductor, his kidnapper. So you can also say abductor. The parents of the first victim made a plea on, they wanted to make a plea on TV until Sherlock stopped them. They wanted to make a plea for information. But this make a plea is very often used in court, and you can make a guilty plea or a not guilty plea, and we often say plead as well. You can plead guilty or not guilty. So please remember these words in relation to law. Also, there was an interrogation of Adam. They wanted information from Adam, so the police interrogated him. It's another good word for question someone, interrogate someone. Sounds obviously more serious because it's usually used for police interviews and that kind of thing. So some miscellaneous words now. A good phrasal verb which comes up in every episode. Watson and Holmes dig through old case files. They dig through old documents to try and find out some new information which might help them find the killer. But you could dig through any documents. You know, you have to dig through documents very often when you're applying for a visa or something like that. You have to dig through some old documents and find some information which the embassy wants. Now, a discrepancy. This is a good word for logical contradictions or incompatibility between two facts. When two facts don't match, there is a discrepancy. So please remember this word for use in general situations when things don't add up, when things don't seem to make sense. I think in some of these Sherlock episodes there are a few discrepancies in the plot. Yeah, things don't seem to make sense. There are some things which seem illogical. But Sherlock notices a discrepancy in this episode. I can't remember exactly which part of the show it was from, but I mean, he notices several discrepancies. For example, the father of the first victim had a bottle of wine where the label was in the wrong place for where he said he had bought it from. He said he'd bought it from the bodega, which was a new word for me, by the way. I'd never heard that word before. A type of shop, I think a Hispanic shop or something like that. But Holmes pointed out that they never put the label on the bottom of the bottle in this shop. So there was a discrepancy between the father's story and the actual facts in the bottle of wine. Okay, Holmes also noticed a correlation. He noticed a correlation between the amount of media exposure that the parents of the victims had and the length of time the child was kept alive. So a correlation means a direct relationship. It's a mathematical word which you usually use when there's a graph like that. Yeah, if this is the x-axis and this is the y-axis, there's a correlation between x and y when you've got a direct correlation between x and y. So it's a good word to use, especially with mathematics, but you can use it in other areas of your life as well. Okay, media exposure I think is pretty clear then now. A burial, when you bury someone and have a funeral, there is a burial. So there were 3 or 4 days before burial. I can't remember why he said it actually again in this episode, but he spoke about the burial of the victims. And he also said, he claimed the reason there was a correlation between media exposure and the time that the victims were kept alive. This was because the perpetrator was feeding off the public grief. Okay, he was. It means he was enjoying the public grief, and the more public grief there was, the quicker that he would become satiated with this feeling. The quicker he'd get full up from the public grief, and he'd have enough and kill the child. Okay, some more ones. To impede an investigation. To impede anything means to stop it or provide obstacles to it and barriers to it. There's also a good noun, impediment. And when we talk about impediments, we're talking about obstacles or barriers. A speech impediment would be when somebody isn't able to pronounce or enunciate their words so well, and so they have a speech impediment. I think I have some problems with R and W, so this would be a speech impediment. I also think I have a little lisp sometimes when I watch these videos again. Okay, the guy had a mistress. He denied it at first, but then he admitted having a mistress, so he was having an affair. It's a good word to remember it's only for women, of course. You couldn't use this for a man, but it means the other woman. Okay, to reconcile with. This guy had reconciled with his wife, which means he'd made up with her. First of all, they separated, and then they reconciled. They came back together. So if you reconcile your differences, it means you make up after an argument. You become friends again after an argument. Okay, a lunatic is a crazy guy. This comes from the word moon. I don't know why the moon is associated with madness historically, and I think in a lot of literature as well, but we have this in our words as well, in our language. Lunatic, a crazy guy. To dispatch, it usually means to send out. So on eBay, eBay will often send you an email and say, you know, this object, your purchase has been dispatched. It means has been sent. That's all, it's been sent to you. But you could also use it to mean kill, and I believe they do in this episode. I think it's used in both meanings. A police car was dispatched when there was a robbery. A police car was sent out. But I believe Holmes also said something about the killer dispatching his victims a few days after a lot of media exposure, yeah? So it can be used to mean kill as well. Okay, Watson warned Holmes that he may relapse. She said a lot of addicts relapse when they're hungry or when they're suffering from sleep deprivation, when they're not getting enough sleep. So relapse means to have problems with an addiction again. After you've already overcome it, if you relapse, you have problems with the addiction again. And lastly, chatter. It just means natterings, which was in episode 2. Idle chatter. It means meaningless chit-chat, you could also say. And Holmes complains about... Well, he doesn't complain. He he says that Watson's chatter helps him to solve the cases. So chatter, it kind of, especially idle chatter, just means meaningless natterings. And sleep deprived, well, I think you understand, it's when you don't get enough sleep, a lack of sleep. Now, here are some reporting verbs that I'd like you to put into these sentences. It's true, I saw my mistress. So, he admitted. Yeah, the father of the first girl admitted or confessed. I'll give you the answers in a second. Number 2, if you give us information, we'll give you immunity from prosecution. So, I think this was Captain Gregson. Offered. What did he offer? Okay, number 3, you're lying and impeding the investigation. Holmes accused him. Okay, number 4, let's dig through old case files. Holmes suggested. Number 5, you should eat and sleep or else you may relapse. Watson warned or Watson advised. Pretty similar, really. And number 6, I won't set her free until I see Adam. This was the first abductor. I've forgotten his name, if I'm absolutely honest. But you can just call him the abductor. Refused. Okay, so answers. So please pause if you don't want to hear the answers yet. He admitted seeing his mistress, or he confessed to seeing his mistress. And by the way, a very good question that I got once was, can we say admit to and gerund as well as admit? And yes, we can. He admitted to seeing his mistress. He admitted seeing his mistress. Both are correct. Absolutely correct. Acceptable. Number 2, if you give us information, we'll give you immunity from prosecution. Captain Gregson offered to give him immunity from prosecution if he gave them information. Okay? I'm putting this into reported speech, obviously. Number 3, you're lying and impeding the investigation. Holmes accused him of lying and impeding the investigation. Number 4, Holmes suggested digging through. It's gerund. Holmes suggested digging through old case files. Number 5, Watson warned Holmes to eat and sleep or else he may relapse. Or she advised him to eat and sleep or else he may relapse. So they follow the same formula, and it's the same as tell. By the way, she told him to eat and sleep. It's exactly the same. And number 6, the abductor refused to set her free until he saw Adam. So it's just 2 plus infinitive with refuse. Okay, if you've enjoyed this lesson, please try my other vocabulary lessons. Please go to my website as well, where there's loads of information, and it's constantly updated with more information every time I do another lesson. And yeah, please, if you want to know more about reporting verbs, try my series on reporting verbs, which should also be linked in this video. If you click on the information, you'll get lots of links to other videos. Okay, thanks for watching, and I hope to see you all soon.